Excuse me. This is not your workshop, sir. Excuse me, back there. That's not your workshop either, sir. All right, so I've gotten a couple things done. I 3D printed a prototype support for my dash. This is very quickly printed, only an 8-hour print, 10% infill, so this is not the final product, but it has the FuelTech app on it. It also has a full real-time dash on it. So I don't have a screen on this, and instead of paying $1,000 extra for the screen and all that, we have this, and it's, you know, I can tune with it. So we have that. I got to just finish attaching this here. It plugs into the back of FuelTech, so that's there. We still have the Nano Pro. I have this completely done and mounted. What I did was I made 2-inch stainless steel brackets off the back of it that clamp to the dash bar so that I can rotate it, move it, take it out. This dash bar still needs to be able to come out, and this can be separated. Take this out, and remember the column ends down there, which means this whole thing can still come out. So moving right along. So here it is with the steering wheel in there. I just, you know, I can move the dash around wherever I want for engine information. But once it gets up into this red, it will flash at me. So, you know, built-in shift light. So yeah, that's pretty cool. So the back of this, I have stainless steel, like what I have this mount made out of. Behind this plastic will be a strip of stainless steel that will go up to where the top of this 3D printed piece goes to, which will give it even more reinforcement, so this thing isn't going anywhere. I'm going to print it so it's 100% fully plastic, so it's not going to crack or anything like that. It's going to take like 3 days to print, but you know, is what it is. But I think that's pretty cool. The USB port is right here, so you can plug it in. One of the little modifications I got to do is I got to move this down about 1/8 of an inch because the USB kind of hits up against the Nano Pro right now. And then we're going to extend this base down another 1/4 inch and extend this over another 1/4 inch. That'll give me the ability to use this mounting hole and this mounting hole. So that takes care of that, and this thing is not going to go anywhere. This Android tablet is pretty light. All right, we've got the final version printing. It's going to take 2 days, so, you know, hopefully it doesn't mess up. All right, now that we have that stuff sorted out in there, we can start working on figuring out the wiring, but there's one last thing I got to sort out. This is a Motion Raceworks pressure distribution block, so this is for pressure sensors, and we're going to be mounting this about right here, and this is just going to make the wiring a little bit easier. So all of our pressure wiring is going to go here with the exception of the fuel pressure. That being because the fuel pressure is going to be on the regulator itself over there, so the fuel stuff stays over there. So this is going to go here, and we're going to run AN line for our oil pressure up to here, our coolant pressure up to here, our crank pressure will run to here, and then our back pressure here, we're just going to extend this up into here so that it's all right here, easy to get to, easy to wire, so that our 5-volt distribution is easier. The ground is, it's just easier to do it like that. And that is all of the pressure sensors that are pretty much on the car. So that takes care of that. One more thing we got to do is swap out the factory coolant temp sensor. We're going to swap that out with a FuelTech one, which is a GM style. So that way we can have more accurate data on that. So yeah, it's almost time to start doing some wiring. I'm probably going to mount the fuel pressure regulator before I do anything. The power and ground side of this is going to take a little while, which is going to be the first thing we have to do. So I'm going to sit back, formulate a plan, and then get started. I sat down and made a list for our power distribution. So all 12 of our buttons are assigned in here. I am going to have the windows working in the front. We need indicators. Something like windshield wipers we'll figure out down the road, because right now I don't plan on this, driving in the rain. Starter position is temporary right now. I might switch it with the intercooler and radiator fan button, or the headlight taillight. I'll play around with that a little bit more. So then we have 5 volt, which is basically just pressure sensors, and the turbo speed sensor. Now this nitrous pressure sensor, we haven't determined if we're going to run the nitrous, because we do have plenty of RPM to play with. If we do need to spool the turbo up sooner, which I really don't think we will, we'll need that. So I'll probably run the wiring for it, but not hook it up. These 4 obviously are going to be in the same spot. Speed sensor, I just looked up, the speed sensor is like 300 bucks. So I don't know if we're going to get to that right away, but I'm still going to run the wiring for it. And then directly the 12 volt battery, we run the cam and crank sensors so that there's no issue with voltage signal or any of that stuff. So those go directly to the battery with fuses on them. They're constantly hooked up. They don't use any power unless the engine is turning. These are the wires we need to start with as far as running them and routing them. So I'm going to do everything in here first. So the power wire for this, the power wire for this, which I have a nifty little thing for, power wire for this and that. Those are all going to go on a distribution block. They're going to be running the same 12 volts, just like these 5 volts are going to go on a different distribution block that I plan on putting back here. That way they're easy to get to. I already put in over there a stud for power to run the battery power into here. And then we'll have this grounded out. There's a factory ground point over there. We'll bolt that down all the way and that'll be grounded to that. All right, so got all of my wire organized. So these are all pre-terminated. Like when we do FuelTechs and we don't use a wire or something, I usually put them aside for instances like this when I'm gonna need a ton of them. So plan is all inputs are gonna be orange wires to just try to keep that a little organized. I'm gonna see if I can put every input except for cam and crank sensor to the input expander, just so they're all going to one spot. Don't know if that's gonna be possible, but we will see. That'll just clean things up for me. We have enough gray and blue here to be able to do the injectors and coil packs in gray and blue, like the FuelTech harnesses are. I have the correct green and red and green and black for a 5 volt power and ground, sensor ground. And then I have an assortment of other wires for other things, power and ground and things like that. CAN bus is another one. So got the wires organized so that I can just pull them out. What we're gonna do is we're going to pin them into the connectors first, not cut them or anything, just pin them where they're gonna be going. And then as I'm doing that, I'm gonna go into the FuelTech and adjust where everything is going in the tune. That way it's all done. And then if I need to reference back to it, if I forget what number goes to what or something like that, I can just back probe here, see where it comes out on the other side. Boom, I know exactly what that wire is supposed to go to. I'll also do the masking tape labeling so that I know where stuff goes as well. So power and ground stuff is going to be first for everything on the inside, and then everything else will get routed, or I should say pinned in, and we'll go from there. So we get these 2 distribution blocks. This one's a little sun faded, but that's okay. So we're going to use this one for our 12 volt distribution off of the main relay that's going to run the ECU tablet and all that. That way everything has its own individual connection that can be checked. And then this I'm going to use for my 5 volt out. Yes, I know it's black, but this is going to be the 5 volt out so that we can run the 5 volt from the input expander and the ECU to this to send out 5 volt to everything that needs a 5 volt voltage. What I'm going to do is we're going to mount these on these flat bars back here. So they will be, the tops of them are away from any metal. The tops of them will be away from any metal. They're easy to get to. And that'll clean things up a little bit. There were covers for them at some point. Don't know where they are, but that's okay. I have the ECU connectors depinned. We have the nano connector hooked up. And I have the input expander connector hooked up. The gray wires are our speed sensors. So that's already wired up. So we have power and ground that needs to be hooked up for that. And then we have power and ground for this, CAN bus for that, CAN bus for this, CAN bus for this, power and ground for this. So got to get to hooking all that up. The CAN bus wiring, we're just going to strap to back here somewhere further out of the way. So we got to get all that wired up, distribution block wired up. So I need to start doing outputs on the big switch panel there. And then I'm going to have everything grounded also to the panel over there as well. The next morning. 14 hours of printing. My kid wanted something printed too, so that's going to take a day. Almost done, 36 hours in. 2 days of printing later, and here we have National Juke 10K all the way. So now we just got to put that in here. This is solid plastic. Like it doesn't even bend. So we got that. I didn't put the holes in here just because I might change the mounting plate on that, but we got that. And then those 2 bus bars that I was going to do instead, I'm going to make my own. So I printed this really quick. This is just a test piece. Put these bolts in here. I'll make 3/4 inch wide strips of steel to put in there. And then I have 3 bus bars, 5 volt, 12 volt, and ground. And we'll put that back here. And what I'll do is I will put holes over there and we'll drill this in, and then everything can just go, that's going to be powered by the same thing on the PDM. Everything can just go to this. So I think that's pretty neat. So I just got to print a solid version of this, which is going to take all night, possibly all day tomorrow. There's a bird in here. Excuse me. This is not your workshop, sir. Excuse me, back there. That's not your workshop either, sir. Sir? Sir? Oh, Jesus, there's 2 of them. Excuse me. You 2 the bastards that printed, pooped on my screen? So inconsiderate. This video has just been pieced together. It's been taking me like a week to get any of this done. So I did a final print of this because this worked so good. You can see I got a couple pieces of metal in there. I got to get some more. So now we have a solid plastic one. This thing is heavy. It's rock hard. I can drill through it for holes for mounting. So we'll get everything wired using the prototype one, and then we will finish assembling with that. So now we got to get to doing the power and ground. So we have this little inverter, which is for powering the tablet. It's a cool 12 to 24 volt input, 5 volt output, which I think is pretty cool. It just plugs in USB, which means if I ever needed to, I could power something else USB with it, like my phone or something. All right, we got the new piece in there. I still have to bolt that in. We've got the power wire ran to our bus bar, ground wire to the bus bar. I just got to give power and ground to that, and then what we're going to do is just make sure that everything turns on, including the FuelTech. So we just have to put power to that over there and then ground to the chassis, and then I should just hit this button or this button and it should all turn on. This will actually just read that it's charging, but we'll get there when we get there. All right, so I should be able to hit this. Oop, we have light. And then this. We get power there. Oop, we got that on. Okay. We're working. See if we can connect to the FuelTech. It takes a minute to boot, so I'll start filming once it's booted up. Okay, we are booted. Let's see if we can read the ECU. Okay, so it's connected, reading. Then we'll open the dash and see if we're getting readings off of it. Struggling. We are, okay, so we have readings. So that's working. So we've got this working, the data log button, all the windows that we got to set up. Sweet. All right. So that's working with the bus bars. We got the jump box on the other side over there. So now that I know that's working, we'll clean everything up for this main wiring. And then we can get started on the rest of the car. So that's cool. It is charging. So if I hit this button, it should shut off. Okay, no longer charging. Now it's on, so it takes 2 seconds to fire it up. And then I just hit this. We're off. All right, so we have the throttle pedal wired in. The steering wheel has been wired in as well. I have put the clutch pedal in as well. We need that for the starter circuit, so we'll get to that later. So now we have a working throttle position. You can see it there. And then we also have working two-step. You can see that change to on and off. And then we have a working boost scramble. So that's all hooked up in here. We got to organize back here. Once we have everything done, we're kind of just getting stuff hooked up to where it has to get it working. But aside from brake lights and light stuff, that's kind of everything that's going on in here is done. So now we need to get to working on other things. So next I'm going to run the starter circuit, which is going to have its own wire that runs direct from our PDM out to the starter, separate from the rest of the harness, so that if we need to access it in the engine bay, it's going to be a lot easier. So we're going to run that, which will allow us to crank over this engine, verify that this is going to do enough juice for that. And then we got to get into the harder wiring, which is, you know, the engine itself. So we're going to start with the stuff that's going to come out of the input expander, which is going to be all of our pressure sensors. So I got to run those wires where they need to go. So nitrous and clutch, we don't need right now. So I'm just going to loop the wires in the area. The clutch one we need for the slipper, and then the nitrous one we need in case we end up running the nitrous. Probably won't, just in case. And then where it says brake pressure, we're not actually doing brake pressure. That is actually what we're using for a crankcase pressure, because for some reason on the input expander there is no crankcase pressure option. Not sure why, but kind of is what it is. And then we already have our wheel speed stuff set up and that's already wired. I just need to run those wires. So kind of make everything off the input expander its own kind of deal. The 5-volt out that comes from that will run to the 5-volt bus bar behind here. And then we'll run the wires for the pressure sensors off of that. And then the grounds for those pressure sensors will just come back to be grounded on the bus bar, so that everything is grounded in the same spot so we can access it. So I'm going to run those wires. I am going to do those in orange because that's kind of what the input expander uses anyway. We'll do that. Once those are sorted out, it's just input output stuff to run the engine off the FT550 that we got to do. So getting stuff in here laid out. So here we have our sensor distribution block. That's how that's going to go, like that. Some nice AN lines going in for all the information. We have our crank pressure, back pressure, coolant pressure, and oil pressure all on there. So that's going to have its own harness that comes in through here. And then intake air temp and coolant temp will have to be added. They're going to be their own separate harness as well that run into this main harness, which we just started laying out. Our power and grounds for our cam and crank are going directly to battery. I explained that earlier. Everything's going to route down, up and around here and into the car. I'll just have to make a grommet for that hole. And that should clean up a lot. It's a longer run than before, but it's a lot further away from potential oil leaks and things like that. Fuel pressure regulator is going to live somewhere like right here. Something like that. I'll just swap the inlets or outlets or do something. So that will go there. Flex fuel sensor is going to go over there. We have the main power line run so that it will go to the battery, which goes to there. So there's not a lot left to lay out. I just need to start pinning things into the ECU, which is the time-consuming part of this. You want to make sure you do everything right, and then we'll go through and finish off the harness, make everything look pretty. I got the starter wire ran up through here as well. Got to hook that up. Boost controller's over there. That will be part of the harness that goes to these sensors. So I'm going to have to extend this canister over to here for the back pressure. I got to run an AN line for the oil pressure sensor, run an AN line for the coolant pressure sensor, and then run AN line. I'll swap this out with a NPT to AN and run an AN line from there for the crank sensor, crank pressure sensor. I have a FuelTech intake air temp sensor to hook up, and I have a FuelTech GM style coolant temp sensor that I got to throw in there. It's actually the connector for it right there. I dropped the sensor itself over here somewhere. So we're actually really not far away from getting the rest of this hooked up. And then once all that is hooked up, we can move back to the inside of the car, hook up things like fuel pump, start working on the lighting, windows, and all of that. I have to remember that a clutch pressure sensor is probably going to get hooked up at some point, so I got to make sure I have the wires ran for that. Just not hooked up. I'll tape them off or something. And also have to have the output for the clutch slipper, which again is going to be a little down the road. But we're making really good progress. It looks like an absolute mess right now, but that's, you know, what in progress looks like. So I'm still really pumped with how this dash layout's turning out. It's so cool.